the Black Male Initiative. Support, guidance, connection at SUNY Empire State College. Welcome to a celebration of history and jazz, Saturday, July 28th, 2018, at the Empire State College, located at 325 Hudson Street in New York. My name is Ralph E. Smith, and this is Guardian Chronicle. A celebration of history and jazz, the Black Male Initiative. Support, guidance, connection. It's all happening at SUNY Empire State College.
Is important. Can y'all say that with me? Culture is important. That's why we're here today to celebrate Juneteenth. And to be honest with you, growing up in what I would believe is a conscious family background, we never celebrated Juneteenth. All right, so this is one of my first, I have to be honest, one of my first Juneteenth celebrations. And that is saddening, but we can fix that. We're gonna fix that today, starting today. Please forgive me, I'd like to be as cool as this gentleman here in the outfit with the nice hat, but I gotta take mine off. And I just wanted to mention, we think about Juneteenth, but I also think about the 4th of July, right? And we celebrate the 4th of July vigorously. But for me, the elephant in the room at every 4th of July event or celebration is Juneteenth. Because I'm not saying that the 4th of July is meaningless. But without Juneteenth, it means less, okay? The Spanish started bringing slaves here in the early 1500s. That's 200 plus years before the birth of George Washington in 1732, all right? So slavery as an institution was already here 200 years plus before the birth of the first president of this nation. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. And then another 100 plus years before we had emancipation. And then 100 or so years before we actually got civil or rights as citizens, before we didn't even have rights as human beings, right? So we let all that sink in, and we're not necessarily celebrating an Emancipation Proclamation. We're here because we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. We're here to celebrate the sacrifices that they made for freedom. Not necessarily a document, but the actions and the contributions of our ancestry. And while we're here to talk about history, we're really here to celebrate our story within the history. So with that, I'm gonna bring up my fellow Black Male Initiative member, Earl Jones is gonna give us a Juneteenth poem.
So I wanna bring you kings and queens, bring you gentlemen. I'm sorry, bring good evening. Good evening. Okay, so when I have a poem that I'm gonna recite to you from Christina K. It's called Keeping Your Heart the Blood. Keeping your heart the blood. Remember always the glory days, the dances, the songs, the chants, the rituals, the customs, the people. Remember times in beautiful Africa, your people, from green forests, golden deserts, to the deepest, darkest regions of Congo and Burundi. Here in this land, here, always in your heart, the beating of drums, the ancient customs of the Kangana. Remember always the kings and queens, Tutankhamun, Cleopatra, but do not sit and not remember the dark days. Keep in your heart the blood spilled by those who fought for freedom. Keep in your heart the blood of the slave as the work touches the flesh. Do not be enslaved, be now empowered. Feel it, taste it, drink it. bathe in it, gather it in buckets, bathe in it, but always remember, keep in your heart the blood.
Thank you, Brother Earl, that was great. And we're going to continue with our program. I'm going to bring up to the forefront a gentleman who has given many years of service to Empire State College. He's a professor emeritus here. He taught here for over 30 years. He's a civil rights activist as well as a civil rights historian. He's a jazz enthusiast as well as a jazz historian. He's also a professional engineer, and I don't know what other talents that he may have in his spare time. Please welcome Professor Joe Washington.
Greetings to our distinguished guests, faculty, students, the men and women who keep BMI moving, the ESC grads and friends who took the time to come by and help us celebrate today. Welcome and thank you. Officially, we celebrate Black History Month in February. Dr. Carter Woodson's original idea of a one-week celebration of Negro History Week in 1926 has evolved into Black History Month. That happened by 1976, and it remains Black History Month to this day. It also remains an occasion to reflect on, learn about, and celebrate the accomplishments, the histories, and the contributions to American society of people of African descent. February is the birth month of Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, Langston Hughes, and a lot of major meetings which led to the founding of the NAACP were held during February. So symbolically, February is an important month in our history. But BMI embraces the notion that Black History Month is every month.
Yeah.
And any day is a good day to celebrate. So that's our attitude about that. I agree with that. Juneteenth is celebrated usually on the 19th of June because that's the date in 1865 that a general from the Union Army made a speech in the town square in Galveston, Texas, telling black citizens that they were now free. This was over 2 years after Abraham Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. But it took a couple of years to finish what was one of the bloodiest wars in our history, and there weren't enough soldiers to take care of fighting the war and to police the South and enforce the federal laws. So slaves weren't told that they were free. So the slave owners got a couple of extra years of free labor to plant and harvest their crops and make some extra money before the word got around. Quite as it's kept during that 2 years, after a call out from Frederick Douglass, over 100,000 African American men joined the Union Army. They fought in that last 2 years in that bloody conflict. And so they actively participated in their own liberation. Simultaneously, they participated in the process of getting the right to vote for black and white males. Because white males who did not own property were not given the right to vote by our illustrious founding fathers. There's a limit to how much they believed in true democracy. That's why we have the Electoral College today and a few other little goodies that they left here to go along with the positive things that they bequeathed us. In any case, after, on the 19th of June, 1865, the word got passed to the slaves that they were free, there were a couple million people with no property, no money, nowhere to go, who owned no land, etc. Well, all of a sudden, looking around saying, what's next? What's next was also a problem of the American government, who had no idea what to do with all of us. So one of the things they did is they had this program called 40 Acres and a Mule.
Oh my.
So that a lot of that land that they had stolen from the Native Americans out west could be used as farmland, because most of the blacks had been farmers. They had farmed the land in the South and made a lot of money for their owners, quote unquote. So it was looked at as a good idea. If you can't send them all back to Africa, find something for them to do, keep them busy and whatever. And so we got 40 Acres and a Mule as a federal program, and you'll have to do your own research, but nobody would be surprised to know that those promises were not kept very well. It's like a lot of other promises made by our federal government over time. So Juneteenth is celebrated because it denotes the official abolition of slavery. But we celebrate many aspects of black history throughout the year, like the birth anniversaries of Dr. Martin Luther King and Brother Malcolm X. We celebrate Kwanzaa, and there are several other things that we do that have to do with our remembrance and our homage to the sacrifices that this brother was talking about, that those who came before us had to make so that we could be here and start the process of what one of our famous documents calls making a more perfect union. And we're still working on that. We are not there yet, but we're still working on that. Dr. Fullard asked me to talk today about some of the connections between music and civil and human rights, especially the human rights movement. And he wanted me to look at several aspects of the music, but have an emphasis on that kind of music we refer to as jazz. Now, to start that process, I would like to read a document that I brought with me today that was written for Downbeat magazine by probably the most iconic figure in the modern civil rights movement, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said, and I quote, "God had wrought many things out of oppression. He has endowed his creatures with the capacity to create, and from this capacity have flowed the sweet songs of sorrow and of joy that have allowed men to cope with the environment in which he lives and all situations within it. Jazz speaks of life. The blues tells the story of life's difficulties, and if you will think for a moment, you will realize that they take the harshest realities of life and put them into music, only to come out with some new hope or some triumphant situation. This is triumphant music. Modern jazz has continued in this tradition, singing the songs of more complicated urban existences after slavery, when life itself offers no order and meaning. The musician creates order and meaning from the sounds that comes out of his or her horn or his or her stringed instrument. It is no wonder that so much of the search for identity among American Negroes was championed by jazz musicians long before the modern essayists, the modern scholars, and the modern writers of books came to terms with writing about it. As a problem for a multiracial world, musicians were returning to their roots for years to affirm that which all people aspire to. Within the souls of all people, there is much to say about the power of freedom. Everybody has the blues sometime, but the rhythms of jazz help you deal with having the blues and give you the tenacity to wait until they go away. This has been true from the early days of the simple Negro spirituals, and now jazz is exported to the whole world. It is a true world music. For in the particular struggle of the black person in America, there is something akin to the universal struggle of modern men everywhere. Everybody has the blues, everybody longs for meaning, everybody needs to love and be loved. Everybody needs to clap their hands sometimes and search for happiness. Everybody longs for faith. And in music, especially that broad category of music called jazz, there is all of the above. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King, in addition to being a lover of jazz, and in addition to recognizing all of the contributions to the civil rights movement from jazz musicians, he also acknowledged that earlier people, before we had jazz music, before we had recording technology, were already dealing with the process of human rights and civil rights, especially in the African American Protestant churches. There were many things going on that spoke to the process that jazz musicians later took up the mantle and carried forward. There were focused and often profound gospel music coming out of black Protestant churches before recording technology enabled jazz and folk and rock and reggae musicians to make it a widespread phenomenon. The song, "Oh Freedom," was often sung in my mother's church when I was a kid. It contained a line which says, "Before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free." There was another song called "We Shall Not Be Moved," which had a line that says, "Just like a tree that's planted by the water, we shall not be moved from this fight." Mavis Staples, Mahalia Jackson, and Sister Rosella Tharpe recorded that song. There's a song called "Go Tell It on the Mountain" that was used by Dr. King in a lot of his sermons, and Peter Tosh recorded that. So did Bob Marley. Later, Bob Dylan recorded "The Times They Are A-Changing." The Fisk Jubilee singers often sang "Lift Every Voice and Sing," which was written by James Weldon Johnson in 1900. But it regained new currency in the 1960s during the height of the civil rights movement, and is often referred to as the Negro National Anthem. There was a New York City school teacher who wrote a poem about a lynching called "Strange Fruit." It is one of the really profound and disturbing protest songs. If you've never heard it, look it up. You'll be in for a treat, and it will make you angry, but it will also show you graphically what a lynching is like. Long before Billie Holiday and Nina Simone recorded "Strange Fruit," Louis Armstrong, one of our iconic jazz musicians, recorded a song called "What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue?" Sam Cooke recorded a song called "A Change Is Gonna Come." that was after being refused service in a hotel in Mississippi, which was for whites only. And he'd been driving all night and needed a place to rest, but he couldn't get a room. This inspired him to write this song. And in 1963, when 3 little girls were blown up in a church in Birmingham, Alabama by some people from the Ku Klux Klan, one of our really iconic saxophone players, John Coltrane, wrote a tune which he simply called Alabama. It's self-explanatory, and it's one of the most beautiful ballads that he ever wrote or played. Change is going to come. It's been recorded and replayed 1,000 times, and I'm sure that you can find it on Spotify or anywhere else if you haven't heard it already. Some of you youngsters may not have heard some of these songs, but they've been around a while. Depends on how long you've been around. This list is too long to go on. I mean, I could talk about this for a whole day, but I want to just talk about a couple more pieces that are in this vein. Oscar Brown Jr. wrote a song and recorded it called Bitter Men. It was a slave auction. It's eloquent, and it shows you how people can dehumanize another human being and treat them the same way they treat their cattle. Okay? That's not long ago in our history. Max Roach, Abbey Lincoln, and Sonny Rollins wrote and recorded Freedom Suite. It was their reaction to the McCarthy era and the FBI making up dossiers on jazz musicians who dared go and do benefits for free for people who were civil rights activists like Max Roach played, so they could raise money to pay Paul Robeson's lawyers and so forth. Okay. Charlie Mingus, a really great bassist, wrote 3 iconic tunes about civil rights. One was called The Fables of Faubus. Governor Orville Faubus famously stood in the doorway of public schools, saying to the federal government that the schools in Arkansas were not going to be integrated, that black students were not welcome there. And so Charlie Mingus's reaction to that was to write a tune called Fables of Faubus. He also wrote a tune called Haitian Fight Song, which commemorated the liberation of Haiti by the slaves who defeated the French army and created the first black republic in the Western Hemisphere. And last but not least, he recorded on several of his earlier records a tune called Meditation on Integration. All 3 of those were composed by Charlie Mingus. Eddie Jefferson, another great vocalist, put to music one of the things I mentioned earlier, 40 Acres and a Mule. It's funny in a lot of ways, but it also tells a lot of history in just 3 minutes. And Nina Simone, who's quite often called the High Priestess of Soul, wrote Mississippi Goddamn, wrote Mr. Backlash, recorded I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free, and a whole litany of tunes that had to do with the topic that Dr. Fullard asked me to talk about today, the integration of music and civil rights. Eyes on the Prize, We Shall Overcome, and Tree of Life was sung by everybody during the movement. And jazz musicians have always been active participants in human and civil rights movements, and their recorded works would take all day, but we don't have all day because there are a couple other things that we have to do. One of them, the people who are descendants of those slaves in 1865, a lot of you and a lot of us are in this room today. And we have some things that we need to be about, in my opinion. And one of the most important ones is voting. No matter how bad we feel on election day, drag yourself out of bed and go vote. This is one of the most important elections in our history coming up right now. There are people who are attempting to replace an already right-leaning Supreme Court with a judge that will make it more so. And trying to do it with a person who's young enough so that even after this current administration is out of office, hopefully soon, its work will be carried on by that court for many years to come. And in November, we have a shot at flipping the Senate. There's only a 2-person, I think, plurality, or 3, in the Senate right now. And, you know, if we can do our advising before our consenting until after that vote, there's a possibility that the Senate may be more amenable to the notion of blocking such judges from sitting on our highest court. In the meantime, we need to be cognizant of the fact that there are a lot of lower federal courts, district courts, and appellate courts that have numerous vacancies right now that are being filled by people with the same attitudes, trying to put in people who are in their 50s or so, whether they're qualified or not, so that they'll have yes men and yes women for their agendas for the next several decades. And while there is a Republican plurality in both houses of Congress right now, there are a lot of district judges who are in districts where progressive people have a shot at having a say about those judges. And frankly, those judges are probably more important than the Supreme Court one, because they often make the decisions that affect our lives directly. The Supreme Court is important, and it is one of the branches of government that has equal power to the president, but they only hear a few cases per year. Of the 3,000 or so cases that were presented to them this past year, they only heard 70. Wow. So a lot of stuff that goes on when people appeal it to the Supreme Court never hears the case. So those judges in the appellate division and the district federal judges that are being put in place right now by this administration, we need to do as much research as we can and do as much as we can as citizens to make sure we have a say in who those judges are and who they are not. So, and without screaming at the top of my lungs, vote! All right? That's one of the main pieces of business that we have before us, okay? That's one of the ways that we can honor the people who were freed on Juneteenth back in the day, so that we can carry forward the process of making this a more perfect union, okay? I know that Judge Kavanaugh is not going to admit that he's anti-Roe versus Wade when he's interrogated by sane people. But if they ask him what he meant when he said that Judge Rehnquist was his role model, then all you have to do is examine Judge Rehnquist's record, who voted against every progressive notion that anybody ever brought down the pike, and to have this man at the top of his fan list, I think is instructive for people who are going to be interrogating him, and I hope they ask him, why Judge Rehnquist? I hope they ask him that several times. Now, we have a couple of things that we're going to do today that are not about dire moments in our history, although some of it may be, but is also going to be uplifting and hopefully a little fun underneath it all. And one of those things is a solo by Mr. Sule Thompson from BMI, who's going to do a solo about it. A change is going to come. So I want to end my little spiel here. I hope that you got a gist of the notion of the breadth and depth of the integration of jazz music and other kinds of music in the civil rights movement, and that if you haven't looked at that corner of our history before, that you will go home and do some research and look further at it. So at this point, I want to say once again, vote and bring up Mr. Sule.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
That was good, but I want a better one. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Here we go. We're awake now, huh?
Yeah.
So, no pressure in doing this song now.
No.
I am honored and pleased to be here to sing and perform for you guys. Dr. Fullard asked me to come and share a song with you guys. I was asked to record this song quite a few years ago with an organization that I actually grew up in, the Boys Choir of Harlem. Thank you. I have a member of the Girls Choir of Harlem in the house, in my sister. Give her a shout out. I was asked to sing the song, and when I was first asked to record it, I kind of gently asked them that I would not have to do it. And the reason why was just the meaning and the depth of this song. I felt that I was too young at the time to really give it its just due. So I hope I give it its just due today for you guys. I was a little too young to know it when I was first introduced to it, but after learning the song and recording it, and especially with everything that is happening today in the news and social media, we put down social media a lot, and there are some good reasons for us to do so. However, it has been a blessing with getting out information, especially when it comes to our community, our people, our struggle, the things that we have to deal with, especially for our men. And anything that happens to our men happens to our women. It affects our women and it affects our children and our families. So it's important for us to continue to have these songs and have them passed down. I'm honored to have these gentlemen play for me today. They just got word, maybe just yesterday or today, that they would have to play for me. So I was grateful for these gentlemen playing for me. And so we're going to do this song, and I hope I do it justice and do you guys proud, and Sam Cooke proud. Yeah. Then I go to my brother, and I say, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. Every time I fall, so long, now I think I may go to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know change will come. Oh, yes, it will. Said it's been a long time coming, but I know change will come. Oh, yes, it will. Said it's been a long time coming, but I know change won't come.
Ain't that right, brother? Thank you so much. We were supposed to have an intermission. And just like in Thanksgiving, you bring out the macaroni and cheese, the collard greens and cornbread is ready, but they tell you they're not gonna bring it out for 10, 15 minutes. That's a travesty. We don't need no intermission, right? Because we're gonna go on with the food that's feeding our soul today. So I'm gonna bring back our jazz enthusiast, jazz historian extraordinaire, Professor Emeritus Joe Washington, to introduce the jazz ensemble.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a quartet here today, calls themselves Lines of Reason, and they're actually, in addition to being superb instrumentalists, everybody in this group is also a composer. It's like a composer's collective. Everybody in this band writes music, in addition to playing it superbly on their CDs. There's a whole slew of original compositions by the members of this group. On the piano is Mr. Michael Cochran. On the bass is Marcus McLaurin, who, by the way, is an Empire State College graduate. Our saxophone player is Mr. Joe Ford. And Mr. Alan Nelson is on the drums. To aid and abet them in ways that if you haven't had the pleasure of listening to this woman sing before, you're in for a treat. Miss Antoinette Montague is going to be our guest vocalist today. And she's going to join the quartet for a few numbers. And I can tell you that a friend of mine died, and we were getting ready to bury him. And Antoinette came and did a gig, and he stood up and walked So we're ready for a serious treatment. And the quartet, because itself lines of reason, and will be joined by Miss Antoinette Montague as our guest voice. Enjoy.
Will the band play one up front? first number we did was a tune written by our pianist called Discovery. We'll do one more. You got the credit for it. I heard some other, I heard other stories, but we'll just leave it at that. Blue and green.
Do what you wanna, do what you wanna, do what you wanna,
Do what you wanna,
do what you wanna, do what you wanna,
do what you wanna, do what you wanna,
do what you wanna, do what you wanna, do
do what you wanna, do what you wanna.
what you wanna, do what you wanna, do what you wanna. Do you wanna have fun? Say, oh yeah. Do you wanna have a good time? Oh yeah. Did you come to celebrate? Oh yeah. Everything is right fine. Oh yeah. Do what you wanna, 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 do what you
amazing creators of this great genius of an art form. So we will make this first song in tribute to all of the architects. So the first one is for the men. Is that all right, ladies?
Yeah.
There was ever a man who was generous and gracious. Good. Brother Joe over here. It was the man. Real low it goes. So steadfast and true. He could stand like a tree 'cause he knew. He knew the real simple pleasures of life. To be devoted to and always standing by me. So I'd be unafraid. There was never a man who was generous, gracious, and good. It was my hand. It was yours too. The man. dad was a good man, faithful and true. Worked 2 or 3 jobs, yeah, all day, night too. He was a kind man, simple gunsmoke, and a toothpick in his mouth. Watching the daily news and the starvage in the house. He was fair. Ooh, he said, all right. The whole house, including the tenants, was quiet all night. My dad's name was James. What was yours? Say your dad's name. All right, everybody, on the count of 3 as if to send some energy up to them and hopefully get some energy for us in these challenging times. 1, 2, 3. Say your daddy's name. Never a man, dumb man. So shallow of a man, hard working, real regular man, hard Mother Nina, Simone. Mississippi's got me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. And everybody knows about Mississippi. Goddamn. Can't you see it? Can't you still feel it? It's all in the air. I can't take the pressure much longer. Somebody say a prayer, we better. This is for the ladies. Whichever way, shape, or form you be. For women. My skin is black. My arms are long. My hair is white. It ain't purple. My back is strong. Strong enough to take the pain. Inflict it again and again, yeah. What do they call me? My name is Saint Sarah. My name is Aunt Sarah. Ironing, washing, and cooking. My skin is yellow. My hair is long. Between 2 worlds, I do belong. My father was rich and white. He forced my mother late one night. What do they call me? My name is Saffron, like saffron rice. am from the great city Newark, New Jersey. And a black mother knows when she's got young females in the house that they may be a little stronger than the world might want to admonish and handle. Because we have to be. Because of the responsibilities. Sometimes you gotta do the boiling and the garbage and everything else. But she knows at school it may not have been so easy if you're a little darker. She may encourage you by calling sweet names like, come on, Cookie, time to go to school. I don't wanna go to school today, I'm gonna fight now. Just come on, relax. Come on, Candy, it's time to go to church today. I don't feel like going to church today. We going to serve the Lord today. Come on, let's come on. Mama hug you, put some Vaseline on you, sit right down. What do they call me? My name is PJ. Defiance. Well, I just feel this because we have not been teaching our young this music called freedom songs. I did a CD called World Peace in the Key of Jazz, and it has many tunes that were put in the air to soften the hearts of hardened people who did not understand that you too are from Africa. Everybody know we from Africa? Yeah. Everybody know we part of the human race? Yeah. That means we all one family? Yeah. We just don't want to act like it. So it's time. Love really is the answer on all sides, no matter what. So we have a couple more. I just want to, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around. Turn around, I'm gonna keep on talking, marching up the freedom land. I did that one, and then let's do a little bit of
yeah. Yeah.
You don't gotta look at Russia. Got you here. How about it? What's wrong with us? It's not just the kids that's supposed to get out over gun violence. In the hallway already, he doesn't know any blues. I'm gonna feed it to him, but we're gonna have a good time. Y'all ready to get some Vitamin B is important. It is the foundation of this music. This music from West Africa, over the Great Middle Passage, where they just threw people in the water to make up insurance money from Lloyd's of London. And they come here, and when we got through that harsh work, music is some kind of powerful, magical, some kind of hypnotic. They took the drum away. We're so brilliant. We just started. Oh, this wood floor, this whole thing, the drum, don't tell me. Gonna run from master to mic. All right. First instrument is the harp. The shuffle blues mimics the heartbeat. That is why we fall in love with it, because it is inside of us. Second is our voice. The African American in the 1850s invented the kazoo. Did you know that? Yeah, that's why they make fun of it. You invented it, but it's the most democratic instrument because anybody can play it that is alive. You have to be dead in order to not be able to play it. Blues and G, my fam. Listen, I'm so in love with these musicians. I've been in all these cats forever. Please give them be the guest and not block a gig, just hire me some more. We don't help each other. If we don't, we need each other. I have a foundation called Jazz Woman to the Rescue Foundation. That's right. And it is to encourage people to take those old instruments out of their closets and give them to disenfranchised young people. But it's criminal that we still have separate and unequal education where there are affluent schools that have arts and teach their children this music called jazz and have big bands, and right across, not even 2 miles away, nothing. So we must really wake up. Kind of sorry we gotta wake up as hard as we do. Sometimes you get a wake up. Well, here's your wake up, unite, and make sure we contact schools that we know are in tougher areas. And let our government know you must have art and music for all children in this country. How do you not do that? Dear beloved Joe, please give him a round of applause. slaves again, we'd rather drink muddy water and what? Sleep in a hollow log. Come on, here we go. 2. 1, 2, 3. I'm down muddy water and sleep in a hollow log. Out at the front desk, please let's give them a round of applause. And the teachers and administrators and helpers, where are they? There you go. All the Emeritus folks in the building, been here 30 years and doing their thing right now, still got something to say. All those people that ran for office that are not talking right now, and he still talking? Wow. Anyway, God bless you. This is the Lines of Reason. The Lines of Genius. The Lines of Kings. 4 kings. 4 kings. Give them a hip hip away, please. Some jam sessions for people who want to sing or just enjoy music on Monday. There's some flyers out there. But my website is AntoinetteMontague.com. What's yours? What's your individual? Lines of Reason. Please introduce every one of your musicians. This is our band leader, Marcus McClure.
This is a co-op band. We are a cooperative organization here with Michael Cochran on piano once more. Richard Fullard on alto saxophone. Alan Nelson on the drums. And yours truly, Marcus McClure. And the professor Emeritus, Joe Washington.
Once again, thank you, thank you, thank you. We kept using the metaphor of food because this group was cooking. Cooking. That's why it's so lovely here. Thank you so much. The mantra is culture is important. Culture is important. Would you like to say something, Professor, before I have Dr. Fullard do the closing remarks? One more. One more. He was trying to back away. You can't back away from this. You started this. How are you going to run away? Joe going to say something about
One little passing remark. There was a Jazzmobile program started by Dr. Billy Taylor and a few other people. And I had a conversation with him once, and he said he got the idea of having the flatbed truck from Father Divine. We used to bring the truck up to 125th Street and sell for $1 a huge meal that you could feed 4 people from. But Father Divine used to do these sermons that were about being affirmative in hard times, about never giving up when you're facing adversity. And there was an American songwriter named Johnny Mercer who used to sneak into Father Divine's services and listen to his sermons. And one particular night, he went in and Father Divine was talking about when things seem like they are bringing you to the end of your road, stand up, be brave, keep fighting, and so forth. And he left the service and went and wrote one of his iconic songs, which was recorded by a bunch of people, most notably Nat King Cole. And I just wanted to run a little piece of that song by you. And I know some of you older folk have heard it before, but some of you youngsters may not. And it went something like this. Accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, and don't mess with Mr. In Between. You want to bring joy up to the maximum, bring gloom down to the minimum. Have faith or pandemonium will make a mess of all your dreams, or something like that. So I just wanted to say to all of you, thanks for coming today and accentuate the positive.
So very, very, very quickly, you had a good time. Oh, yes. This was not easy to put together. There were a ton of people that worked to make this happen. I need to just mention some of those names. First and foremost, the executive body of BMI. Larry is not here. Larry is the president of BMI. He couldn't make it today, but Joanna Richardson, please stand up. And every man is a woman. This is her. Carl Hall is a vice president. She's in front. Yeah. Our vice president, Carl Hall. Earl Jones, our videographer, photographer, special thanks to my co-faculty advisor, Dr. Leah Matthews. All of the BMI students that came out to help today, with really special thanks to Diamitra Siate. I know I'm messing up the name. Please stand up. Along with Ron Wiggins and Carmen Feliciano. This college would not be here without Carmen. Amen. Our front desky people, Daryl and Jasmine. A very special thank you.
She's quite a singer, Demetria.
Singer?
She's quite a singer.
Oh, I know. We've heard her. She's gonna be up here with you on stage.
I mean, at the end of the day, I should have.
Yeah, you should have. You should have. This man sitting here, Mr. Joe Washington. I usually call on him like 5 minutes to when something is needed. Joe, can you? I give great thanks to you. You really make these things work. I was really grateful. Earl, who we now know is a poetry reader. Earl, thank you so much for reading the poetry. And I'm gonna brag. This is my student. I'm his professor. We interviewed him for a program that I run. It's called the Fortified Classroom, and during the interview, we're looking at his resume and like, wow, this is really impressive. I wanted to hear his voice, but I didn't have the heart to say, would you sing something for us? And Miss Lisa Whiteside, one of our adjuncts, she got away with it and said, sing something for us? And floored, myself, Lisa, Steve Tischler were there, we were floored. We were just speechless. Thank you, sir. Thank you. The men behind me, seen them play at Smalls many times, seen them all over. Marcus is one of our grads. Give it up again for this group. Marcus
I got this.
recognize, and I want him to stand, Mr. Elliott Dawes, who is our Chief Diversity Officer. Elliott's been here a few years, and the day he set foot in this place, he started working with the Black Male Initiative, writing grants, doing all sorts of things. No one ever asked him to do it. He did it on his own. He did it because he understands the importance of it. Elliott, we don't have words. Thank you so very much for all that you do. And the last thing is really important. Joe brought it up. The midterm elections and the local elections. I just want to add one thing to what he said. There are a lot of people out there that are not registered. Start grabbing them, especially these young men, young women that don't understand the importance of this, that people died for this. Grab them, get them registered, and then on the day that the election is held, grab them again, drag them to the polls, even if you have to bribe them, get them to vote. Our lives actually depend on it. Our lives depend on it. Finally, there's one of our BMI grads outside, Mr. Omar Richards. He's a grad of this college, and he's currently at the CUNY, get this right. What the hell are you at? The CUNY Murphy Institute. He's working on his master's degree in public affairs. He's a salesman. He's selling some African products. On your way out, take a look. Yeah, there he is. Stick your head in here, man. Lastly, I want to thank the audience. You guys were incredible. My heart was really warm. What did I forget? Yes, ma'am? Where's Dave Gechlik? Dave! Dave Gechlik. Dave and I head up the Criminal Justice Club, and Dave provided some of the money for this event tonight. So give it up for Mr. Do some shopping and enjoy the rest of your... Oh, there he is! Once again, thank you all. This was absolutely wonderful.
One ovation for Dr. David Fullard. Because without him, we couldn't get this, we couldn't pull all this together. Because sometimes we need a little bit of clout. You know what I mean? As in, clout. All I gotta do is, hey Doc, I'm having an issue. What's the issue? And then all of a sudden, the issue disappears. So I want to really thank Dr.
Because I haven't seen him in 20 years, something like that. Right. First of all, we're here with the retired, outstanding two gentlemen, all right? We got Chris Lynch on this side, and Tommy Summers, two outstanding men in law enforcement and members of the Guardians Association. What did you both think about today's program?
It was crazy, it was phenomenal. Well worth Saturday afternoon.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Joe Washington recap on what Juneteenth is about and the importance of music in the civil rights and human rights movement. It was wonderful.
Professor Whiteside, a former law enforcement professional of New York City, what did you think about this program today?
Excellent. I'm speechless, actually. I came and I thought it would just be another African-American-based program, but it was phenomenal. The singers were phenomenal. people that I haven't seen in a long time were here. Lots of students, more students than I anticipated. So it was fabuloso, to say the least.
How can my viewers find out more information about these programs and this school, this college?
Okay, well, with regard to this program and the Black Male Initiative program, that was also a great supporter of this event. Anyone can send an email to Dr. David Fullard. All right, his email address is david.fullard@esc.edu. And again, that's david.fullard, Fullard, @esc.edu.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time and thank you for your outstanding participation in all that you do here in this college.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great one.